Okay, we're back. We're live. It's Wednesday, right, Scott?
Yes, it is.
It's Wednesday. Just checking.
Yeah, yep.
And Wednesday means a few things. You know, one is it means it's a date of clean energy. We always have clean energy on Wednesday. It's kind of defines Wednesday. But also we have catch up with Kakaako Day at 4 p.m. every Wednesday. And we're committed to that. ThinkTech is committed to that as a community matter because community does matter. You know, to define, to examine, to help shape the discussion, or at least provide a forum for it around Kakaako. The most important community discussion we have right now. I would say rail used to be, but right now it's not rail, it's Kakaako. That's where we are. And if we don't participate, there'll be a price to pay.
Yeah.
You know? Anyway, so Scott Wilson, he's the chair of the Urban Design Committee of the AIA, American Institute for Architects. And he's the president-elect of the AIA Honolulu, which is down the block, one block down, which we really like being close to you guys.
We're very close to you,
know.
Corner of Queen and 4th Street Mall.
Yeah, and we always, think of architects as artists, but it's more. Architects are much more than artists. They're engineers crossed with artists, I think. Yeah?
There's a big, healthy dose of pragmatism in our art.
Yeah.
We used to joke and say it's about 90% function and 10% art.
Yeah. Still feel that way?
I feel that way, yeah.
You think of civilizations gone by. You think of all that humanity has ever done anywhere in the world, and it's build cities. Building cities is the most important thing. That's where we live, literally where we live. And the people who are essentially in charge of that, at least in the last couple centuries, have been architects because they help us build cities with, large populations and complex public infrastructure. We need somebody to help us do that, and the architects are the ones. And architecture, like everything else, is going through changes, and Honolulu is going through changes, and so it's really wonderful to have you here, Scott.
Thank you. Well, we try to represent the public interest. I mean, we do obviously work sometimes for developers, we work for the city, we work for private landowners. But the difference, I think, for architects is that we're trained to have a public interest component of all of our decision making.
Yeah, I wonder, I'm trying to turn my memory bank back on Atlas Shrugged. Wasn't there an architect in that book?
Oh, yes, definitely.
And,
very much.
It's about, architectural duty and maybe ethics. It's about architectural contribution to the building of a society. And, you wonder exactly where we are in a world where, all professionals are under a duty of confidentiality these days, even if that's not the law. I mean, for example, lawyers and clients and clergy, they have a protected confidentiality. Architects and accountants don't. So, you may feel that, or the client may feel that he wants you to, be confidential, but it's not exactly pure. And then, of course, there's this whole duty about value engineering. I mean, I remember we had a period of time in Honolulu in the 70s, I guess it was, where, the developer would come and say, I want to pay 2 cents for this now, not a penny more, and you find a way to give me 27 units for 2 cents, and the architect would do it somehow.
Yeah.
It wasn't pretty.
Yeah, there was a sacrifice there.
Yeah,
Value engineering is a sort of a loaded term for us because we view it somewhat bittersweet because many times it just means we cut out essentially the unique items, the kind of that give a real character to a project, and you get back to just a generic project.
Yeah, and it's not like, you sit with your grandchildren at your knee and you open up your book of photographs and you show them that value engineered building and say to your grandchildren, this is what your granddad did. This is his legacy. Oh, no, you wouldn't say that.
No, I'm afraid I'll keep that picture to myself.
Put that in the closet, deep in the closet. But I mean, is it fair to say on this topic, though, Scott, is it fair to say that architecture as a profession, a profession now, as a professional experience is changing?
Oh, it really is. It's a national debate right now, from national AIA headquarters in Washington all the way down to the chapter level. We are aware that our profession has radically changed. The word that we use, unfortunately, a lot is erosion, because our traditional areas of expertise are being eroded by many things, whether it's technology, economy, or just client practices. So we have to adapt, And one way we're trying to adapt is to remind the public that we have an interest in the public interest, and that they can consult us when they have questions about that.
Yeah. God, I don't know why. That reminds me of automatic typewriters. I'll tell you what I mean. When I first started practicing law, they had a electric typewriter. And it costs a lot of money. It costs like, $200-300. I mean, that's old. This is 1960, 70 prices, made by IBM. And you could go out, the lawyers could go out and buy one and use it as a, piece of industrial equipment in the office. And it distinguished you from the public because they wouldn't spend that much money on a typewriter. And then a few years later, all of a sudden, there was the mag tape machine and the mag card machine, and now it was getting to memorize things. And there was another one that had a kind of a dial in the front, and you could dial a page of memory or text and put that on and it was getting pretty sophisticated. And the gap grew wider between what a lawyer could afford in his office to generate, documents and what an ordinary person would have at home. But then somewhere along the line, I would say in the late 1980s, early 90s, the computer. And then Joe Dokes the ragman could buy a computer, and he could have an unlimited amount of memory and power, and he could compete with all the machines in the lawyers' offices. So all of a sudden, all these books and discs that came out and said, be your own lawyer. Here's some forms. You can do it yourself. Why pay a lawyer hundreds of dollars or whatever it is? Okay, and so the public now could get in on it and do it themselves, right or wrong, good or bad, doesn't matter. They could get in on it to their own satisfaction by using the technology that the lawyers had invented, and that's still the way today. I mean, for a few bucks, you can have a word processing plant of huge power.
You can buy your TurboTax and put your CPA out of business.
Same thing.
You can write your own will, and the analogy with architects is the
There is
same.
an analogy,
There's
yeah.
CAD programs now. There are light versions of AutoCAD and VersaCAD that people are tempted to say, well, heck, I can draw that. I'll draw out my own house.
Yeah, so, I can imagine, I haven't seen this myself, but I'm sure you have, where the guy buys a $100 program for AutoCAD Lite. He designs what he likes in his house, and he comes to you and says, Scott, here's what I want now. Put your stamp on that.
Yeah, that's when I look for the closest door. Yeah. Yep.
But it's the same thing. I mean, when they come to a lawyer with a draw your own will kind of program, and they say to the lawyer, "This is okay."
Yeah,
just sign at the bottom.
Check it over for me.
Yeah, it's pretty much okay, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's when you got to leave the room.
It is. I mean, obviously, technology is a great equalizer, and we have to recognize that. We're not going to fight that. So we just have to rely on our traditional areas of real training and expertise and convey to the public what those are and when they can be used.
Yeah, so it comes back to Atlas Shrugged. It comes back to building cities for humanity. It comes back to, it's hard. I really want to find the right words on this, but it's making a home for the development of the human race. Building the structures on which we can have progress. I mean, nobody is more thinks about that and actually has an effect on that than architects do. We can have boxes, but it's not about boxes.
Environment. The built environment is everything from sidewalks to trees to storefronts to the high-rise towers to the parking decks. That's all built environment, and you have to be able to visualize that and imagine how is that going to impact people walking along the street? How will that improve their lives? And I think that's what we have to really be aware of in Kakaako. It's not just how many towers and where do they go. It's more like what happens between the street and that building. What is that environment like for someone walking along? Is it going to be attractive that they'll want to get out of their car and walk, or are they going to just say, "Oh, that's a 300-foot tower. I'm just going to keep in my car and drive through." Yeah,
it's very subjective, and yet you can predict how people are going to react. In other words, if I tell you that I walk through this neighborhood, this several blocks that you plan, I mean, with that in mind, that I really had a good time. I enjoyed that. That was a high point of my day. I felt that my life on this planet was enriched by it. I really mean that. I mean, for me, walking through a good neighborhood and feeling all the energy of it, it enriches my life that day and all days. So if I tell you that, you have to go a step further and say, well, Jay Fidell is not alone. What he says is not anecdotal. I mean, we can determine as a matter of taste how the public in general will like this. You know, there are human standards, and we know them. We can apply them. You know,
and there are examples. You know, we know there are nice neighborhoods, even in Honolulu. We can replicate. If we like the continuous storefronts in Chinatown, we can say, okay, this block should have continuous storefronts like Chinatown. Or if we like a walking neighborhood, say in Makiki or Kahala, that's particularly nicely detailed, we can replicate that. You know, and that's what the Complete Streets program is partly about, is bringing all those little details together that tend to fall out and not be addressed by any one program. And I like Complete Streets because it is focusing back on the street and the sidewalk and the pedestrian experience.
Yeah, so it is a matter of experience. It is a matter of how you feel. And I think in the 21st century, you know, we should give people that. We should give people that. It's like giving them a better quality of food or a better quality of housing, you know, and a better quality of health and all these things, a better life. And one of those elements in life, clearly to me, is how your city feels to you.
Yeah.
What kind of experience you have walking down the street, whatever you're doing there. I mean, you know, I worry about people who live in cells, who live in tiny little boxes, and they don't get out that much. And as they get older, they get out less. And if they get out, they go fly away to some other place, but they don't really enjoy the environment around them. It's like all these people who, you know, talk about how important the environment is in Hawaii, and yet they never walk on a hiking trail ever in their lives, and they don't let their kids do it either. And so there's something really hollow about that. It's the same thing when you live in a little box and you never get out on the street. We should love the street. We should relish the street. We should go there with a zeal. And that is what the promise of Kakaako is, isn't it? As opposed to other neighborhoods, which came about in this kind of, you know, fits and starts organic thing where nobody knew what was going to happen. This time we know.
This time we are overtly trying to create a different kind of built environment that's really what you might call truly an urban village or an urban neighborhood, because it's walking based. It doesn't require a car. You'll be able to walk to work, to play, to shop. A car is an option, and that's a real break from anything we've seen in Honolulu in the last 200 years. So that's an element of change that some people get a little bit apprehensive about, but I welcome it because I think it's more sustainable. It's more resource friendly, and yet it can actually offer a very rich life too.
Yeah. Of course, well, let me just go back to one point that comes to mind, and that is if you look at those old photographs, you know, of those brownstone buildings downtown here on 4th Street, right, this very building here in the core of downtown, they were cold, they were hard, they were imposing, don't you think, buildings. They weren't particularly friendly or warm. They were telling you, you know, we're in charge. They were telling you, we are the establishment, we are formidable, you know, don't mess with us.
Well, this was a downtown, and it's always been our downtown, and downtown is always more formal. You know, it's not meant to be real residential in feel. It's to house the institutions and the big businesses, and so I don't think you want to get too alarmed about downtown being formal and cold. That's partly the nature of the use there.
Tell me what Kakaako is in your mind's eye. I mean, and from all that you know about livable, walkable, sweet, you know, interactive streets where you can have a really wonderful experience even in a few minutes. What's there on that street? What just, you know, take me for a walk.
Well, I think what a lot of people are looking for is an example of a good Kakaako. This is, unfortunately, I can only point to sort of examples of less than good Kakaako right now. But certainly that whole SALT development that Kamehameha Schools is developing on Oahe Street near Cook and Coral is a good start. It's low scale, it's human scale, it's continuous storefronts, they're little alternative shops and restaurants. It's a 24/7 kind of feel. It's only one block, which means right now it tends to get a little bit lonely. But that's what I want to see expanding, all through Kakaako.
Lots of different blocks like that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Storefront, interesting,
it should
unusual.
be knitted together. You can't just do isolated islands,
Yes.
or people will end up just driving from island to island. And we want this whole thing to be walkable. So you go one store after another, and you're motivated to just keep on strolling.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's take a short break and come back, and I want to ask you about form versus Euclidean thinking, and how that plays in the development of the buildings in Kakaako, and whether those buildings can allow for that special experience of walking down a street full of small, we used to call them taxpayer stores.
Okay.
That's Scott Wilson. He's the chair of the Urban Design Committee of the AIA Honolulu, but he's the president-elect also. This is Community Matters. We're catching up in Kakaako. We're talking about public or private spaces. Public or private spaces.
Okay.
We'll be right back after this break.
Aloha, my name is Willow Chang Alion, and I host a show called The Art of Life. We air live every Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. And what we do is basically we focus on individuals who create a unique sense of place for Hawaii. These are movers and shakers, artists, innovators. They are also traditionalists. They're all involved in the archival process, and they make this place a unique place, one that makes Hawaii a richer place to be. I hope you do join us, and certainly tell your friends about the show, whether they live here or they live abroad. It's a way to give back to our community. We're keeping it Pono.
Okay, we're back, we're live, we're here on a given Wednesday, and Community Matters because it does. We're talking about catching up with Kakaako. We're talking about public and or private space in Kakaako with Scott Wilson, who is an architect and the chair of the Urban Design Committee of the AIA Honolulu, also the president-elect. And we together are designing the place right now.
This is fun. Boy, we have so much power. Yeah.
So talk about form-based code and Euclidean-based code.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Jay, this is a kind of a technical issue that the public is not really aware. And we had a town hall meeting a couple weeks ago, and I held up two different bundles of paper in my hand, and one was bright orange and one was white. And I just wanted to really bring home the notion that there's two different planning documents in the city. And for the bulk of the city, the land use ordinance is a Euclidean code, Euclidean planning code based on Euclid, Ohio, and it's the tradition that goes back at least 100 years is to divide land into uses and to allow certain amount of square footage on each piece of land. And it said nothing about where you put it on the land or the shape or any of that. It was just, okay, you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you can put in 30,000 square feet of building. End of story. So but the trouble with that is that in combination with our suburban requirements for parking and setbacks and so forth, we ended up creating these cities with these terribly broken up street frontages, and everything became car oriented. We had big parking lots in front of big stores. Everything was set back. You had no interest in walking anymore. So, to their credit, the planners of Kakaako said, okay, we got to start from scratch. Let's go to a form-based planning code. So that's what they're using. And
is that right? That's
in place since 2011.
Okay.
And
they
were
only.
working on that from 2004.
Okay. Good.
So it took a long time to write it up and to get it approved, but it was finally approved, and it is actually very cutting edge. It's an excellent document. These are good rules. They are specifically geared to creating the kind of built environment. It shapes it. When we say it's a form-based code, it actually regulates the form of the building. Where does the building sit next to the street? Does it have a canopy? Does it have, is it retail, or is it, where are the doors and so forth? And how tall is it, and before it has to set back? So all of these things are rules that are meant to create very pedestrian-friendly environments. So this is radically different from the city. In fact, in my opinion, we ought to be adopting this plan for the rest of the city because
Sure.
it's good.
Yeah.
It's very good rules. We have seen the sort of deleterious effects of suburban zoning on our city. I mean, right in the heart of Honolulu, in an urban area, we've got huge parking lots and parking structures right on the streets, and that's not good for a city.
Yeah.
So
But how do you achieve form-based? I'm just wondering, because I see form-based as the art side, because it puts you in the work of art, so to speak.
It's sculpting the building. It is sculpting a building.
Making it human scale, and Euclidean doesn't care about that, but form does.
Doesn't, right?
So how do you actually write a code? Give me an example of a provision that would yield a form-based building.
Well, okay, let's go into, say, Queen Street in Kakaako. If you go into the documents, you look on Queen Street, first you'll see there's a setback line. There's a build to line, it's called. Okay, so it'll say, from the property line, you're allowed to go back 10 feet, and then you must build your building right there. So all of those new buildings on Queen, for example, will be 10 feet back from the property line. So you'll have a continuous street front, even with different property owners. So that's one form. Secondly, it will say, here's this kind of street frontage treatment you must have. You must have a canopy that goes out 8 feet, and you must have trees at 10 feet on center.
You must have.
Yeah, you must. So it is sculpting for you. It is telling you, this is how your building will look on this street. So for every street in Kakaako, there is a build to line. There's a street frontage type. So obviously on some big streets, maybe you're allowed to go up to 60 feet high with a podium because it's a broad street. On a small side street, maybe you're allowed to go to 25 feet or 30 feet.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah,
actually,
so
Scott.
it's much more directive about what the buildings will come out. So there's less chance. Our whole problem is that our city has grown up just willy-nilly with the old zoning style, and this is going to be more consistent.
Okay, I'm impressed with that, and what I'm left asking myself is why all the controversy about the planning in Kakaako? Because trees are good, and wide sidewalks are good. Even moderately wide sidewalks are good, and all this is written in the code for HCDA and Kakaako. So what's the argument about?
Well, I'll tell you one argument, or one reason we've had some lawsuits is that the rules have not been followed out in all cases. They've been handing out variances to developers for particular projects, and so sometimes you're talking 5 or 10 different variances being handed out on a given project. So they were allowed not to build up to the build-to line. They were allowed to encroach into some open space, or they were allowed to put a parking structure on the street. These are things that are supposedly not allowed, and yet the developer has come up with various reasons and said, "Oh, I really need this," and they just said, "Oh, okay, all right, we'll give you an exception." So and you end up watering down what was a good set of rules. You're watering them down because you're omitting some rules and you're allowing variances.
Yeah, the solution sounds simple. Do what you said you were going to do.
It actually is. I've been looking at the comments from some past speakers at our town hall meeting, and accountability and following the rules. Those phrases kept coming up from different speakers. Why don't they follow the rules? Why don't we? Why doesn't the public have a chance to enforce these rules or hold HCDA accountable to the rules that they have on their books?
Yeah. So these what do you call it? Variances and concessions of one kind or another on the rules. I mean, is it too late on them? Have there been? You said there've been some lawsuits about it. Maybe that's an opportunity to make sure it is enforced as written.
The thing is, there is no legal basis for suits. The HCDA, unlike the Department of Planning and the rest of the city, they have a very strict variance procedure, and when they grant a variance, then citizens can appeal to the Zoning Board of Appeals. They can even file a civil suit, and if you're aware of this recent hotel case in Waikiki that Kyo-ya proposed, they've gotten a variance about 2.5 years ago, and citizens groups have basically worked through the legal system, and now the Hawaii Supreme Court is actually going to hear the case sometime this year. So there is I think an excellent process at work. At least
This is for the city in general.
Yeah, now this was in Waikiki, but I'm saying that analogy, we should have that option in Kakaako.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'll say it for you again. We should have that option in Kakaako.
Thank you.
Because I think, you know, we're see if you agree with me on this, we're in a turning point place. Yeah. You know, at first going into this, I think HCDA had and its directors, you know, had one view of things and how they could allow fast track, you know, development. But I think, and although a lot of the opposition has not succeeded in the way the opposition wanted to succeed, still there's a conversation going on, and the architects are interested, and a lot of people are sort of coming into the conversation, and maybe we have a transformation of this system happening here. I hope there's time for it. There's room for it. It's not too late, but maybe we have that going.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously HCDA has done an exemplary job with the infrastructure and the utilities, and that they were sort of under the radar for 30 years because they were just busy working on the streets and the sewers and the utilities. But now they've had a track record, and it's the corner of P.E. Koi and Ala Moana. That's a corner. There's 6 towers right there that have been built and pretty much finished. And so now people are starting to realize, oh, now I can see what Kakaako might look like. And unfortunately, those 6 towers reflect the old rules, and they are not terribly successful in terms of a pedestrian-friendly environment. So I think now there is concern. They're starting to say, oh my goodness, is this the way we're going to have, is the rest of Kakaako going to look like this? You know, help us. So there's apprehension, and I think part of our AIA's mission is to explain to the public, no, there's actually been a change in rules. The rest of Kakaako will not look like that little corner. However, we have to stay vigilant because even though the best of rules are in place, they're not always enforced.
Yeah, and maybe, you know, I mean, one thought, and then we'll have to take a break, but it seems to me that the transformation involves a rethinking of how the rules are made and enforced, and the role of the public, you know, and all the stakeholders in having the rules made and enforced. And you know, we may wind up at the end of the day with some problem projects that still offend people, but we may also wind up codifying a new approach to this going forward, and that would be in itself a success, you know. And a success for the architects too, because you'd have some predictability, not only of the rules but of the process on how they're dealt with.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's take a short break. Scott Wilson, architect, chair of the Urban Design Committee of the AIA Honolulu, and president-elect of the AIA Honolulu, and his AIA office is right down the block at 828 4th Street, not 200 feet from here.
Oh yeah, very close, next door.
We like that. This is Community Matters. We're catching up about Kakaako. We're talking about public and private spaces down there, and we're going to talk about private spaces after the break. Ooh.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Martin Despang, and I'm the host together with the one and only Ali Yamashita, and our show is called Urban Transcendence. And Urban Transcendence is about identifying where we have a unique situation of a vibrant city in one of the most beautiful natural environments. So how these two can coincide, sometimes conflict, how they could find reciprocity in the 21st century is what we're excited about. And we're planning on bringing in a diverse body of guests, both from the arts and the science and the established and the wise and the emerging generation. So hope you will join us. We'll always be on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m.
Okay, Wednesday, and community matters because it does. And we're talking about catching up in Kakaako with Scott Wilson, who is an architect and the chair of the Urban Design Committee, very important committee with AIA Honolulu. So yeah, I want to go to private spaces, but per our discussion in the break, just to refresh a little on Michael Kimmelman, who spoke on April 2nd at Yale over, what did he call his talk? Politics and Public Spaces. Mm-hmm. And it really reaches way back, like I was talking about older civilizations, and he was talking about making spaces, the public spaces respond to the public and make a good life. Mm-hmm. And you saw that, so I'm happy that you saw that. What was your impression?
Well, I wanted to mention that New York has some very unique parks. They are private parks for public use, and I think Kimmelman's point was that when say IBM, for example, IBM is allowed to build extra square footage on their building, they can set aside a little pocket park next to their building, and that's a so-called public park, but it's privately owned. However, there's always a balance between encouraging homeless to come onto your park and keeping it attractive to all users. And so I think Kimmelman was just saying that in part, a well-run park of that sort, it's a delicate balancing act because there are politics involved. If you keep it overly patrolled and to keep out the homeless, well then it's really no longer a public space. It has to feel open to the public, and yet you don't want to turn it into a homeless camp. And so that's the dilemma. We don't have. I don't think we have those kind of parks so much here in Honolulu, but as we all know, we certainly have a homeless problem, and when I drive by the Art Academy every day and I see this huge row of planters now, and I just think, well, the city managed to get rid of all the homeless, but they also filled up the entire sidewalk. No one walks on it anymore. Yeah. So it's a balancing act, and there's no easy answer. Yeah.
Well, but it's an interesting reference to that part of his talk. By the way, this talk's on C-SPAN, and if you Google Kimmelman and politics of public spaces, you'll find it right away, and you can watch it. It's about an hour. It's really excellent. But one thing that you mentioned that touched me watching that was this notion that the homeless are part of the public, like it or not. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to make them disappear. They help to define us in a funny way. Mm-hmm. And when we design public spaces, we can't just exclude them automatically. We have to make some room for them. They are part of our community. Mm-hmm. That was a really interesting notion.
I know. I mean, we think about, I think for locals, we think about Moana Shopping Center as almost our neighborhood park, or it's a place we can go and stroll. But that is very much a private shopping center, and if you think that's really open to the public, you just try dress up as a homeless and try to take a couple of steps in there, and you'll be pounced on by security guards, and you will realize this is not a public space. Yeah,
and they're entitled. I mean, as a private owner, they're entitled.
Yeah,
and there are special rules about constitutional freedom of speech too. Yeah. In a private but public shopping center. No. Anyway, so I wanted to get to the issue of private spaces. And if you take form-based code, which we like, and make what amounts to a beautiful, a picturesque neighborhood that's got all kinds of interesting surfaces and planes and angles. If I stand there looking at it, it draws me in. This is important. Can this live, however, with private spaces that are what seems to be happening is really expensive private spaces? Mm-hmm. I mean, without mentioning names, I went down to a showroom showing some of the private spaces that are being built in Kakaako. I mean, even as we speak, and the prices for these apartments are absolutely astronomical. I wouldn't mention them, except actually, this is a family show, and it would be disruptive. They are so expensive. I mean, nobody I know in the whole state of Hawaii could afford some of these apartments. Nobody.
Oh, yeah.
And so can you have a neighborhood where the streets are what you call form-based, and the buildings look good and the public places look good, but inside those buildings are apartments that are either empty retreats or occupied by people who have so much money that they can't possibly be part of the community, and they have no roots in the community at all. And the people in the street can't get into the building. The building could be in Mars.
Yeah.
Which I think, in some parts of Kakaako, some projects, that's exactly the way it's likely to be. Can this work?
Yeah, I mean, if I talk about those those 6 towers there at the corner of Pi'ikoi and Ala Moana, that very much is, in some ways, an alien environment, because it's all of those towers are luxury towers. They're all $1.5 million and up for the price of any unit. They all have private spaces up on about the 4th floor with their barbecue pits and their pools and their doggy parks and everything. And I just don't see a real way around that. That is, in effect, a sort of a mini gated community, a vertically gated community. But the streetscape can certainly be open to the public, and that's what's really important.
So interesting. It's a gated community, you're right. My personal expectation in my life, I don't know, maybe a lot of people, is I'm never going to see the inside of those buildings. I'm not, unless I have
you got to get some
very
better
rich
friends.
friend.
You need a better quality
cut
of
friends, right?
Yeah.
But assuming I don't, assuming I'm, because I don't know anybody who can afford some of these buildings. I mean, ever. So I'm never going to get to the inside unless it's really a strange set of circumstances. So what you have then is this kind of reverse prison effect, where you can't get in those places. And, the people in those places, they can watch you, but you really can't see what they do. And it feels funny. And you wonder if I wonder if, for example, if there's a street commotion, I don't mean disorderly, but a lot of people in the street, say it's an eat the street kind of thing, and it's right outside some of these spectacular units, which are open. I mean, they got courtyards and lanais and what have you, and the noise can waft up to, any number of stories up there and make a racket. And some of the guys who live in these places pick up the phone and call HPD and say, that's too noisy for us, you've got to shut that down. I wonder what's going to happen on that. I mean, is HPD going to respect the same notion you and I have been talking about, form-based, public-based streets for people?
Well, I think there's always going to be potential for neighborhood complex. When you're in a heavily dense neighborhood, you're going to have street noises, and this is occurring all over the city right now in high rises, that the noise wafts up from the street up third floors.
The famous weed whacker bill.
Yeah.
The leaf blower bill.
But just to back up, the overall plan within Kakaako is to have a row, sort of oceanfront condos that are in the $1 million+ range, behind which it will steadily drop off in price. So this is just market reality that in order for developers to carry off these big master plans, they need to sell their expensive beachfront buildings, and then they can afford to build additional, more affordable housing to the Mauka.
That's why they build the nicer ones first.
Yeah.
Cash.
Yep, they need that. This whole thing is, right now, the pace of construction is really hot because the economy has picked up, the infrastructures are in place, and the HCDA is giving pretty quick approval to these projects, and so they want to strike while the iron is hot.
Yeah, and then they can get the cash to build the other ones, and before you know it, it's really happening. And what's interesting is I went down to see a model sort of showroom of some of the floor spaces. This wasn't accurate floor plans, but just sort of the gestalt build out for some of the units there, right on Ala Moana, and they told me that 75% of the units are in contract with deposit.
Wow.
75%. And of those, and this is really interesting, of those, half of them are local buyers.
so.
You know, that's
And that's
really
actually
interesting.
higher than we expected. We had heard 80% absentee buyers, so you're talking more like 50%, so that's actually an improvement.
Yeah, yeah. Now that what you wonder about, and this happened with some of the units that are already in Kakaako, the previous round 3-4 years ago,
Yeah.
where local buyers went in all right, but they did back-to-back closings and spun them out as soon as they could, so that they could make a quick turnaround buck, and then ultimately the buyer would be from far away. Now here there's supposed to be a provision that says you can't resell until 1 year has gone by. And that may help to modify that. But I mean, I suspect that a lot of those 1/2 of 75%, 37% of the buyers are going to be in there for a spin if they can,
Yeah.
because they see the market and they
Yeah.
want to have a piece
This
of
is a
that.
good investment. I think it's a solid investment. If people would ask me, I want to invest in real estate in Honolulu, I would point them to Kakaako, no question.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because it's happening. There's action. I mean, there's no other
Yeah.
place in the state. Not only is there action, sometimes you see, I'm sure you've seen this in your practice, you see a building planned or in the early stages, and there's nothing around it, and there's no action, no market. They can't sell the units, and they go off the side, go bankrupt, leaving a steel frame or something. This isn't going to happen, I don't think, in Kakaako. These buildings will get built. And there will be a market, and there'll be people from far away, and close and far away, buying those units.
Yeah.
And the neighborhood will develop. It will.
The location is just inescapable. You can't believe how convenient it is to everything, and it's an enormous area. So the potential right now vastly exceeds what's actually there. But I think everybody is very excited about the potential.
Yeah, I'm getting excited, but I'm not going to buy one of those really expensive units. I'm telling you
I
now.
would hold off. Wait till you get something 2 or 3 blocks off of Moana.
Really?
Those are going to be
I
good.
hope that it'll be within a reasonable budget, but
Yeah.
I'm not optimistic about that.
Yeah.
So what are the challenges here? I mean, for us, for you and me as citizens, for you and me as observers, for you and me as community-minded, people who care about public policy and how our city grows. What are we worried about? What can we do about it?
Yeah. Well, I think the key word with Kakaako is vigilance. We've established that there are some good rules, and we need now to hold our elected officials and our agencies to their feet to the fire, that they really do follow these rules. Because otherwise, it's a hollow exercise, and we potentially could end up with a Kakaako that really falls far short of its potential. It could end up being just literally a bunch of suburban islands with these big towers with a big podium, a parking structure around it. Everybody comes down, gets in their car, and drives off every day. And A, we've created way too much traffic on some small streets, and B, we've lost a fabulous potential to create a walking environment. So,
How would you compare that, this kind of congested, expensive units, not really open for public interaction, with the Waikiki experience? I mean, would this be a kind of, residential high-rise Waikiki? Is that what it would feel like?
yeah, in some ways, I mean, Waikiki is extremely dense. Kakaako will not be as dense as Waikiki.
That's good.
But there are many good things about Waikiki. You can walk the streets of Waikiki. There's lots of trees. It's a lively environment that you will never get tired of things to look at. You can wander it and crisscross it through all different grids. And Waikiki is a special design district. It has its own sort of form-based rules as well. That's why it came out the way it did. So I tell people, Kakaako is sort of a hybrid of Chinatown and Waikiki. There are elements of both of those, and maybe that's a scary thought. I don't know, but try to think of the good energy of Chinatown, the continuous retail storefronts. Try to think about Waikiki and the high-rise residential towers that are sort of set back off the street. And I think somewhere in the middle is what Kakaako could be if we do it right.
Yeah. And whatever we do, it seems to me, it's going to define, it's going to define public spaces. It's going to define, the new Hawaii.
Yeah.
Because what I think the way it comes out will be both a result and a process that is used elsewhere in the state, other parts of the state. I mean, I wouldn't, I don't want to think about it, but maybe Kailua even, maybe Kapolei even, maybe other islands.
Kimmelman mentioned in his lecture that the streets were not seen as public space. In early New York, remember, he said it was just the province of the homeless and the destitute. But over time, New Yorkers started thinking of their streets as their public spaces, and they started dressing them up and really using them. And in a way, that's what's going to happen in Kakaako. We're going to start to realize, hey, Queen Street, Ward Street, Awahi Street, those streets are now our public spaces. Those are our rooms, our outdoor rooms. They have walls on either side of them, but now we can go down there at night and eat the street, or we can do night market or whatever, and we will be using our streets as spaces.
So important. This is all very important. Would you come back and talk to me some more, Scott?
I'd be happy to. Anytime, Jay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's Scott Wilson. He's an architect and the chair of the Urban Design Committee of the AIA Honolulu, right down the block. And he's the president-elect of the AIA Honolulu. This is Community Matters because it does. We're catching up on Kakaako. We should like to do every Wednesday, 3 to 4 p.m. And we're talking today about public and private spaces in Kakaako, but there's so much more to talk about right now and to talk about going forward. Thanks again, Scott.
You're welcome.